Have you ever been truly content? Maybe it was a passing moment when everything just felt right in the world. Or maybe it was a particularly joyful season. But in a culture that tells us that we need more to be happy, contentment is an incredible gift. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this new series titled Contentment. Today, we focus on a spiritual truth that's been passed down from generation to generation and even confirmed by the social sciences. Generosity is essential for contentment. It may seem counterintuitive, but the happiest, most content people are those who focus less on themselves and make generosity a way of life. While generosity leads to lasting contentment, our culture often pulls us in the opposite direction, especially around the holidays. Now that Halloween is over, people are already asking, what do you want for Christmas? Our children will soon start sharing their wish lists, and many will be long because kids tend to think that they'll be happier with more toys. It's easy for parents to get caught up in this way of thinking too, causing them to overspend on gifts that are quickly tossed aside or shoved under the bed. But in our better moments, we know that more presents don't make our kids happier. While most of us know this on an intuitive level, it is also supported by science. The University of Toledo conducted a study in which researchers observed 36 toddlers between the ages of 18 and 30 months. Each child participated in 2 different play sessions, one with 16 toys and another with only 4 toys. Researchers observed to see if those with more toys had better play experiences, but they found the opposite. When toddlers had more toys, they quickly jumped from one to another, limiting their exploration and creativity. In contrast, children with fewer toys engaged more creatively and had more fun. They were actually happier with fewer toys. And I wonder, does this same principle apply to adults? Of course it does. Even without delving into the research, we know deep down that accumulating more stuff doesn't lead to lasting happiness. Yet we easily slip into the mindset that a new car, a bigger house, or the latest smartphone will finally make us content. Even if we don't say it out loud, our spending habits tell the true story. Now, I'm not saying that it's a sin to have nice things, but we undermine our happiness when we rely on the next purchase to make us feel complete. So what does bring contentment? What brings peace and joy? According to Scripture, part of the answer is generosity. Proverbs 11:25 says, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." Paul writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, "Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously." And Jesus says in Luke chapter 6, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap." The logic of these passages is clear. Generosity is not about losing something, it's about gaining something. When we share who we are and what we have, it comes back to us in spiritual wealth. The riches of God's wisdom and goodness, the gifts of peace, love, and joy, the gift of contentment. Once we glimpse this economy of grace, we understand that Jesus was telling the truth when he said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." Although this saying is counterintuitive, it makes sense when we remember that we've been created in the image of a generous God. Just think about it. God gives us an incredible planet with day and night, earth and ocean, plants and animals. He gives us life, the very energy that animates our bodies and the breath that flows through our lungs. God gives us creativity, art, and beauty. And God even gave his only begotten Son, Jesus, to save all creation. Everything we are and everything we have is a gift from God. Amen? And since generosity is essential to God's nature, and since we are created in God's image, it only makes sense that generosity would be essential to our nature too. Consequently, we cannot realize our full humanity or experience true happiness unless we live a generous life. However, realizing our purpose and experiencing true contentment requires more than sporadic giving. Even stingy people can occasionally give when they hear a sad story about displaced children, or notice that the person next to them is putting a few bucks in the church offering plate. While these are good deeds that help others, sporadic and emotional giving isn't enough to transform us into truly generous, joyful, and content people. This kind of change requires us to cultivate the habit of giving so that it becomes a way of life. In 2018, James Clear released his book, Atomic Habits. Has anybody heard of Atomic Habits? It was quite the hit. And he explains how small, consistent actions compound over time and radically change our lives. In the case of generosity, if you want to become a more generous person, then giving must become a way of life. And we have to remember that we're not talking about just giving money. We're talking about giving of ourselves, our time, our talent, our treasure, our testimony, giving ourselves away to help others. And if we want to become more generous, then generosity must become a way of life, and this happens through repetition. Just as you can't become a better golfer without practicing on the golf course, you cannot become a more generous person unless you consistently practice giving in your church and community. And this is why tithing is considered a spiritual discipline in the Christian faith. We don't ask you to give simply to pay the bills of the church, but to help you habituate generosity so that God can transform you into a generous person and help you to become content. Now, I know that it's November, it's Stewardship Month, and we talk about generosity and tithing. And I know sometimes that when people hear the pastors say tithing, they immediately cringe and wish they had skipped that Sunday. But just hang in there, because if we understand tithing properly as a spiritual practice, a spiritual discipline that helps us to become more like Jesus and that helps us to become more content, then we will see it as an opportunity, an invitation, and a gift, not as a burden or something to be avoided. And many of you probably know that the word tithe originates from the Old Testament and means a tenth, 10%. And one of its earliest mentions is in the story of Abraham, who after winning a battle and receiving many spoils, gave 10% to the priest as an offering to God. You see, in ancient times, 10% was known as the king's portion. And Abraham gave this portion to God because God was the king of his life. And later, Moses codified this concept in Jewish law with the offering of the first fruits. People were commanded to take the first 10% of their harvest, the best and earliest portion, and give it to God. And giving in this way conveyed several important things. Think about the message that it sent. It acknowledged their dependence upon God. How often do we get full of ourselves and think that I have what I have because I'm a pretty awesome person and I worked really hard? Giving in this way acknowledges, well, maybe I have worked hard, but God is the giver of all good gifts, and I'm utterly dependent upon God, and without God, I would be nothing. It expresses gratitude in God's provision. It's a way of saying thank you. And it helped the people of ancient Israel to build a life around generosity, trusting that God would lead them to true joy and contentment. When we talk about tithing, people tend to get hung up on the goal of giving 10% of their income, which is one reason why some people shut down. And this can feel overwhelming, especially as many of us are just struggling to pay the bills, especially with rising costs. Discouraged, they don't even try. But I want to remind you that the amount is not what's important. Jesus illustrates this through the story of a poor widow. While in the temple one day, Jesus saw many wealthy people putting large amounts of money into the temple treasury. Then a poor widow came forward and donated 2 small coins. And Jesus explained that while the rich gave from their abundance, the widow gave all that she had to live on, making her contribution far more significant in the eyes of God. And in this way, he teaches that true generosity is not about the size of the gift, so we shouldn't get hung up on amounts. But the most important thing is the spirit in which the gift is given. So when we stop focusing on the amount of our gift, we can shift our attention to what's most important. Consistent, practiced giving. We are called to prioritize generosity. To start from the very beginning, before we start writing any checks and say, you know what? I'm created in the image of a generous God. I want to reflect that generosity in everything I am and everything that I have. And so before I start making any financial decisions, I'm going to make a commitment to be a generous person. And when we make that decision on the front end, then we set a goal. This is what I want to give. I want to give this much time in service to others. I want to give this much effort when I'm helping the poor. I want to give this percentage of income to the ministries of the church. I want to share my testimony with this number of people. We set a goal, and then we practice toward that goal every week until it becomes a habit, as James Clear would say, and that generosity becomes our lifestyle. Although 10% might be the long-term goal, it might be wise to start with a smaller amount, especially since the amount is not what's important. Returning to the book Atomic Habits, James Clear reminds us that a 1% effort every day can lead to remarkable changes in the long run. In addition to making it easier to start out developing a new habit, he points out that small incremental changes are more sustainable and effective than attempting large, sudden shifts in our behavior, which often set us up for failure. So if you're not yet giving a weekly or monthly offering to support the ministries of the church, you might start by deciding to give 1% of your income. Very small, doable commitment. Or if you're already giving 5%, consider a 1% increase as you work toward the tithe, the 10th. Again, the most important thing is not the amount, but a commitment to prioritizing, practicing, and habituating generosity. Because this is how we discover what it really means to be content, to be happy with what we have, and to not feel a sense of want, compulsive spending, to not feel like we're lacking in anything. So the first question that we ask this morning is not, will I give to the church? It's not even a question of how much you choose to give. The first question is, do I want to be joyful and content? You know, I get people in my office on a regular basis who are struggling with all kinds of things in life. And it's amazing to me when they come in and share all of the problems that they're having and all of their fears and anxieties, that I don't really have to say anything new. I just have to repeat what we've already heard in Scripture. And so if someone comes to me and says, Pastor Mark, I feel like I'm just always struggling. It seems like there's never enough. I don't know what it likes. I don't know what it's like to feel content. And I ask, well, are you prioritizing and practicing generosity? And they say, no, I'm too afraid. What if I give and I don't have enough to take care of myself? Remember, it's not the amount. There is a person that attended our church. He's now too ill to come. Came to 11 o'clock service. And this gentleman was retired, was living on just barely enough to just afford his own prescriptions. And every Sunday, he got an offering in the front pew, and he put $1 in the offering plate. And I get the giving reports, and every week when I look at it and I scan down and I see this guy's name, $1. And I think to myself, of all the people that I've been in ministry with, he gets it. Because it's not the amount. It's the consistency. I am going to make this a priority, and I'm going to practice, and it's going to become habituated so that it's a way of life. And I guarantee you that if he ever came one Sunday and he didn't put $1 in the offering plate, he had done it for so many years, it would feel really weird for him because it's become part of who he is. Do you want to be content? Do you want to be at peace in your life? Do you want to feel like you have enough? Do you want to focus not on what you don't have that you want, but are you ready to start focusing on all the good things you do have and to savor the joy that comes with gratitude? Are you ready? Because if you're ready, it's going to require some effort on your part. It's going to require the practice of giving. And so that's the first question. Do you want to be content? And if you say yes, then we have to start taking steps to make generosity a way of life. So in the next few weeks, at this point, I'm just talking to the members of our church. If you're new with us this morning, I wish that you could have come 5 weeks ago when I did the series on Wesleyan Rooted. I always get a little apprehensive when new people come, and it's the lead-off sermon on Stewardship Sunday. But I just want to tell you that at this point in the message, you can just begin to reflect on how God's calling you to be more generous. There is a Lectio Divina handout in your bulletin, and you can begin to pray through some of this stuff. But right now, I want to talk to those of you who are members of our church who have stood up front and made promises to give your time, talent, treasure, and witness. Because you're going to be getting a letter from me in the next couple of weeks inviting you to prayerfully consider what percentage of your income God is calling you to give to the ministries of our church in the coming year. And in this way, I'm going to be inviting you to prioritize generosity so that it can become a way of life and help you become more content. This is what's most important. However, your giving also makes our ministries possible, and it helps our finance team to create a responsible budget when we know how much you plan to give. Now, some people cringe when they see pledge cards, but I want to tell you that they're an important tool for our church because they provide a reliable estimate of expected offerings for the coming year. And this is what enables our leaders to create a more accurate, responsible budget that aligns with our actual income. With accurate information from you, we can better plan and allocate resources, avoid overspending, and ensure that our church lives within its means. We can also make informed decisions about staffing, ministry programs, outreach efforts, and facility maintenance as we diligently work to fulfill our mission. So in addition to a year-to-date charitable giving statement, my letter will also include a pledge card. And no one's going to call you if you don't fill one out, but I want you to prayerfully consider helping our finance team by filling out the card and bringing it back to church. You may even want to hold on to it and bring it up and put it in the offering one Sunday when you come forward to receive communion. But I want to close this morning by introducing you to my friend, Eddie Gellis. You may know him from his business, Edge Properties, or through the local surfing community. But Eddie has a very generous heart, and during the Thanksgiving season, he works hard to collect food and other items like socks and underwear to help the homeless. And I want to invite you to hear a little bit of his story as we prepare for Holy Communion. So I want you to pay attention, especially to what he says at the end about how generosity has enriched his life. Check it out. Well, hey, everybody, it's Pastor Mark, and I'm here with my good friend Eddie Gellis from Edge Properties. And the reason why I wanted to interview Eddie is because he does a lot of work in the community to support the less fortunate. And one of those projects is happening pretty soon around Thanksgiving time. So, Eddie, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with me. And I just wanted to begin by asking you, where did you learn about generosity?
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate you getting in touch with me, and this is a pretty special time of year for me personally. And I guess to start out, I watched my parents in retirement, and I felt like they were working harder than they ever did. My mother became the president of the Arizona Women's Club, and she was actually Volunteer of the Year for Central Florida back around 2000. And she never seemed to stop. She was out collecting for charities and little fashion shows she did for the ladies' clubs. And my father and I were a lot more alike. He was more behind the scenes, and he would go out and play golf with some guys, and then he'd flip over the hat at lunch and say, "Hey, everybody, I'm going to go out and buy turkeys for daily bread for Thanksgiving." Or, the Country Methodist church is where they belonged, and he would say the food pantry's a little bit shy. Come on, guys, kick it in. He was a little more straight up like that. And, he's one of my best friends, so I was fortunate enough to watch him. And really, after he started to get a little bit older and slow down, he grabbed me and he showed me what he was doing. And one of his favorite pet projects was he went down and he liked to make the iced tea for Daily Bread Shelter down in Melbourne. And he wouldn't let anybody else near the iced tea. He wanted to make sure that it had his formula on it every day. But he made sure that if there were no other donors during the holiday season, that he would focus on making sure that all of the patrons of Daily Bread received a wonderful Thanksgiving feast and also a Christmas feast. And fortunately, we have a lot of folks we know and just about always went beyond what it cost to feed them. So we were able to supply them with warm clothing, some jeans, underwear, socks, and the necessities of the shelter. And that's really where it began for me.
That's great. Well, tell us a little bit about how you're continuing that tradition. And I know Thanksgiving's coming up, and you're going to be collecting some donations to try to continue in that legacy. So tell us a little bit about that ministry as it exists now.
Absolutely. My father passed away in 2010, and my parents were married about 53 years. So when he called me over to have a little chit-chat bedside, I looked at him and said, "Don't worry, Dad, I've got her. We'll take care of Mom." And he said, No, that's not, she's going to be fine. I need you to continue on with my Daily Bread project. So he asked me on his deathbed to carry on his legacy of feeding them from Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that started, and I did it with him his last year while he was falling ill. And I picked up the torch about 2010. So the last 14 years, including this week, will be really me with a couple of friends who've joined me over the years and just carrying on my father's legacy.
So, Eddie, whenever you're doing this work, I know it's work, and there's effort and time and energy that has to be put into it. But what's the payoff for you? Like, how do you feel whenever you're helping out the less fortunate?
Mark, that's a great point that you made. And I think that when I first started, it was a lot of work because a lot of things were unfamiliar to me, and navigating how to get Publix to give me a good deal on turkeys and, making sure I could get 30 at that sales price that they only want to give you one or two. And, I've got a few butchers and friends that have really joined in over the years. So it's really become kind of like my family as I go through this period of time. And, as spiritual as I can be, my father really joins me. I feel his presence during this period of time. And I really feel like we're doing this together. I don't consider it one iota of work. The blessings that I receive, the support I get from folks like yourself, my friends around town, people check in every year to ask if they can help. It makes me feel like I'm somebody that I'm not. It's just, I'm giddy. I cry all the time. I can't believe how kind people are. Some people I see daily, and I don't think that they live their life daily that way. And then they come over and hand me $100 and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is so exciting to me." It brings out the best in so many people. And I just don't even know how to say anything other than thank you.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Eddie. I'm honored to be your friend. Thank you so much for all the wonderful work that you do in our community. And I'm sure that your testimony is going to be a blessing to our church. So thanks again.
Well, I'm very blessed to be included, Mark, and you're a wonderful man and a terrific pillar of our community. I really care very much about you and your family.
As we turn our attention to Holy Communion, let us prioritize generosity and trust that God will work through our giving to bring us the riches of a joyful and content life. Remembering the words of Jesus, it is more blessed to give than it is to receive.